ever been tricked? You know, fooled, deceived, misled, or even left feeling a little stupid? I know I have. Today we're starting a new series called Tricked, where we're going to be talking about one of the biggest tricks of all, temptation.
Now before we go any further, let's make sure we're all on the same page. Temptation simply means the desire to do something that we know is wrong or unwise. In other words, temptation means wanting to do something that may not be the best for us.
And I have some news for you. Temptation is something we all face. Like, it can feel like we're the only one dealing with temptation, but I promise you, you aren't alone. We all struggle with it, and that's why we need to know how to work through it, especially since temptation can pull us towards some pretty unwise decisions with potentially big consequences.
Maybe for you, you're tempted to try things like drugs and alcohol at a party. I mean, it looks like fun, so it can't be that bad, right? Or maybe you're tempted to take things one step further with your boyfriend or girlfriend more than you know you should. If it feels good, could it really be that bad? Maybe you're tempted to steal from a friend or lie to your parents or look at inappropriate pictures online. No one's ever going to find out, so what's the big deal?
That's the thing about temptation. It has the power to draw us towards unwise choices by convincing us that they aren't as harmful as we think. Things like drugs, alcohol, lying, cheating, gossiping, stealing. We all probably know those aren't wise choices. But somehow, temptation tricks us into believing they aren't as bad as everyone makes them out to be. So we give in, maybe just a little bit at first. And before we know it, we're so far into an unwise choice or behavior that we can't seem to get out.
And here's how things get even more complicated. Not all temptation is actually bad or harmful. They aren't actually going to kill you or ruin your life or do whatever terrible thing you think happens when you give in to temptation. I mean, maybe you really love sweets and you're tempted to eat donuts every single day. Or maybe you love video games and you're tempted to play them for hours every night. Maybe you love clothes or sneakers or whatever the latest trend is, and you're tempted to spend all your money, and probably some of your parents too, on making sure you have those things.
Donuts, video games, shopping sprees. Are those things going to kill you? Are they going to ruin your life? Are they going to hurt you or someone else? Probably not. But are they the best for you? Probably not.
That's the tricky thing about temptation. It's never what it seems. It has a way of leading us into believing that it's not that big of a deal and that it isn't as bad as everyone says it is. Whether we're talking about donuts or dating, temptation tricks us into believing that the thing we're tempted by may actually be what's best for us. When we believe that, it's very hard to say no. And when we don't say no, it can be hard to find a way out.
But the good news is this: there's a way out. In fact, there's a way to avoid ever getting into the messy trick of temptation in the first place. It's something we all need to know because temptation is a powerful thing we all face.
To help us figure out why temptation is so tricky, we're going to take a look at a few verses from the book of James. Now, James is kind of a big deal if you ask me. Not only does he have a book of the Bible named after him, but he was also the brother of Jesus. Can you imagine being the actual brother of Jesus? #family goals.
James's book of the Bible was actually written as a letter designed to help people live the way God intends. And James knew that part of being able to live a godly life was to understand how temptation works. Here's what he wrote. When a person is tempted, they shouldn't say, "God is tempting me." God can't be tempted by evil, and he doesn't tempt anyone. But each person is tempted by their own evil desires. These desires lead them on and drag them away.
Okay, let's stop here for a second. Essentially, what James wanted us to understand is that temptation is not from God. When we're tempted by things we know aren't the best for us, we can rest assured that God isn't the one pulling us in that direction. God isn't in the business of tricking us or putting us in situations where we'll be tempted.
So if it's not God who's tempting us, what is? Well, James said it's our desires. And of course, desires on their own aren't bad. But when they're what James called evil desires, the kind that pull us towards what's not best for us, those are no good. And they have the power to drag us down.
How? Well, let's go on. When these desires are allowed to remain, they lead to sin. And when sin is allowed to remain and grow, it leads to death. Whoa, that's intense. So let's break it down. When we let our desires lead us towards temptation, James said we're walking into sin. Now, sin is anything that separates us from God. It's a choice, a behavior, a thought, a word, anything that keeps us from living the kind of life God calls us to live. And when we let sin stay with us and give it room to grow, when we keep giving in to temptation over and over again, we're walking towards something even worse, death.
That's some heavy stuff. But of course, we're not talking about actual death. I mean, cheating on a math test or talking bad about a friend or hooking up with your boyfriend or girlfriend won't actually kill you. So what did James mean here? Well, another way to define the word death in this verse is harm. When we give into temptation, follow our desires into sin over and over again, it can seriously harm parts of our lives. Things like our health, our relationships, our grades, and even our future.
Temptation doesn't always start out that way, but that's where it ends. Regardless of what tempts us, when we're tricked into believing the things we're tempted by aren't that bad so that we continue to do them over and over again, it can quickly lead to harm.
Temptation tricks you. It has a way of convincing you that doing unwise things isn't actually that bad. It leads you to give in to desires that aren't always the best for you. And it tricks you into sinning, ultimately harming parts of your life.
I don't know about you, but I don't want to be tricked anymore. So what do we do? Well, I think there are a few steps we can take to help us avoid giving in to temptation. And step one is identify it. Like, what's the thing you find yourself being pulled toward over and over again? Like, what do you want to do that you know isn't the best for you? Identify it. Call it by name. Sometimes simply being aware of what's tempting us is half the battle.
Step two, tell someone. Invite someone in to help you stand strong when you're being tempted. Maybe for you, that person is a small group leader, a trusted friend, a parent, or an older sibling. But make sure that it's someone you trust and someone who's also living the life that God wants for them as well.
Step 3, make a new plan. Sometimes the best way to escape temptation is to change course. Make a brand new plan that helps you avoid finding yourself in a situation where you'll be tempted. Maybe for you, that's not being alone with your boyfriend or girlfriend. Or maybe it's not keeping your phone in your room at night. Maybe it's not going to that party or being around that one group of friends.
I know not giving in to temptation is tough because simply knowing something isn't what's best for us doesn't take away our desire to do it. I get that. But my hope is that you'll at least stop and think before you give in next time. And maybe you'll even make a different choice, a choice that will move you away from temptation and back towards God's best.
Some of you know all too well that temptation tricks you. If you're sitting here thinking, it's too late for me, I've already been tricked, I've already given in, then I hope you'll be here next week. Because believe me when I say that no matter how many times you've given in to temptation, your story doesn't end there. So as you leave today, I want you to think about this one question. What's one thing that tempts me?